We spent 12 months developing, designing, testing, and racing, and winning these products. They're gonna be for sale for order this Black Friday sale. Starting with the rear grip kit, I'm gonna go over all of the benefits, improvements, and design changes that we made to this kit versus anything OEM or anything on the market. We're also gonna go over the front, cover the details, performance advantages, and reasons behind why we did it this way. You guys are gonna be really happy to know the products are gonna be sold, stocked, and priced reasonably to sell to the general public. Let's start with the rear. Taking a look at the rear suspension, there's a lot of things going on, and it's hard to see all the details that I'm about to talk about. We machined a new billet knuckle that replaces the OEM knuckle. We did this to have a better camber curve, better adjustment for camber, dual caliper mounting brackets, which is super important, easier installation and swapping of suspension, and roll center correction, and a whole lot more than just that. But those are just a couple details as to why we did it. The rear knuckle on a Corvette is actually the same as the front knuckle. Corvettes did a really interesting design where they took the front knuckle, essentially flipped it from the front left to put it on the rear right. They did that, and I mean, it's a brilliant idea and it works really well, but we specifically made this rear knuckle to serve as a drifting knuckle in the rear, which the front knuckle didn't do a very good job at. The camber curve and everything wasn't great with it. You're gonna have dual caliper options for dual Willwoods. You're gonna have the option for a factory brake and a Willwood as a secondary, or you'll be able to run just the factory brake. 3 options. It's gonna open up the door for what is available in terms of rear grip kits for this car. The other point is the camber adjustment. We have 2 points of camber adjustment. On-car adjustable fasteners at the subframe side, and then we have the quick camber change plates. These camber change plates can change the camber from 0, plus 0.5 or minus 0.5, plus 1 degree, minus 1 degree. All done here and all done within 30 seconds. A couple other points that we have, the rear toe arm connecting point on the knuckle has bump steer or toe gain adjustment. The way that this works is you simply remove the bolt. You can add shims above or below where the tie rod mounts, and this will increase or decrease the amount of toe gain that you have under compression. But the next, one of the best features that the Corvette needed really bad was anti-squat adjustment. The Corvette from factory has very high anti-squat, and under compression, the anti-squat continues to increase because it's an A-arm, not a trailing arm. So the actual mounting angle doesn't change. And as the center of gravity lowers, that angle from the control arm goes through the center of gravity to then above the center of gravity or wherever it may end up. You can see that it's going to increase as it compresses, which is a great feature, but not if it starts at a point that's already too high. So we gave you the ability to adjust anti-squat from the factory location, and then 3 more points below that. You can see that right in here on the subframe. Jack, can you see it? Here? Can you see? Yeah. Okay, Jack. Okay, guys, this is the anti-squat adjustment bracket. This bracket bolts to 2 bolts on the subframe that used to be used for the leaf spring. And then it offers 4 holes in the sides that are going to give you the original location, 1 hole below, there, and there. So with that, we are able to adjust it. I have tried all the positions. They all work great depending on what you're after. We are currently running it in 1 position above the lowest, which still has some positive anti-squat, and this car was an absolute rocket ship. So this is basically adjusting the amount of pressure that the tire pushes into the ground under acceleration. Drifting is a bit weird because the rear tire is in a constant slip, and then we're using left foot braking sometimes in the front. So there's a lot of things going on in terms of how anti-squat works with drifting, but having an adjustable option is definitely a key. The other things are the sway bar mounting points on this kit, and then the motion ratio adjustment on the lower control arm. This is the lower control arm that I designed for my car specifically. The grip kit that will be available will not be this lower, unless of course you specify it, but what I did with my motion ratio and how I mounted the top of my coilover, most people are not going to be willing to do that. This is actually a front coilover specifically made to my specifications, mounted in the rear so that I could get a motion ratio in order to get around 6.5 inches of travel in the rear. Factory suspension only gets around 4 to 4.5. That is what you will be dealing with when you buy the kit from our website, unless you email us specifically, but this setup will be very costly and the advantages are pretty minor. So if you buy this kit, you'll be able to run normal coilovers that you have off the shelf. You will still have motion ratio adjustment, but the coilover is going to be mounted closer to this area rather than here. And then the top is going to be the same as factory. The arm will also have factory sway bar mounting points. On my car, I run a custom sway bar mounted on top of the frame rails, which you can see here. So that, again, the upper control arms, they're going to have that as an option. Like the holes and everything will be there for that to be done if you wanted to do that, but that is more of a full car, you stripped it down to the chassis type of thing. Otherwise, the lowers are going to have a factory sway bar attachment point, and that can be seen on Jay the Drifter's car, and he has been running that kit all year as well. He is running the production rear grip kit that will be for sale online. It's worked great for him, it's worked great for me. These cars have too much grip, which is a great problem to have, because if you have too much, you can dial it back. If you don't have enough, you're done. That's pretty much it. These are pretty sweet. Again, you can take these off on each point, and then the control arm will actually come off. Leaving the Heim joints on the subframe, I can't reiterate this enough. It is so nice, if you damaged anything, to leave the Heim joints in the subframe. It is so much faster to put the arm on and take it off. I've seen too many people lose in a 5-minute timeout trying to get misalignment spacers, bolts, washers through a subframe. Doesn't matter the kit, it always is a problem. This design is a game changer in terms of fast repairs. So onto the front. All right guys, this is the infamous rack relocated Corvette kit in the front. Starting off with the brakes again in the rear. You notice that I run these 2-piece brake rotors. It's a lightweight brake rotor with an aluminum hat. The part numbers and everything are actually the same front to rear, as well as the calipers. The only thing that I do with the calipers is I change the bore sizes depending on if it's for the front, for the rear, or for my handbrake. So my handbrake actually runs the largest bore size possible, so I can lock it up with like one finger. The front runs the same bore size as the handbrake, and then the foot brake runs an 1 3/8 bore. It's a little bit smaller. I don't need as much brake pressure in the back, so you can request that we make these brake mounts and offer you these rotors and part numbers. It is kind of expensive, but man, does it ever drop a ton of weight, and it looks cool, and it's definitely better performance for drifting. We do not need the thick, like 1-inch vented rotors that are really commonly used on road race cars and getting rid of a bunch of heat. We're only doing 30 to a minute runs. If you did it one more time, you're still not gonna have a problem. So that's why I run these brakes. It reduces a ton of weight. Let's give this thing a turn, and you're gonna see what's going on here. So we have a full billet knuckle that is designed to have bolt-on mounting points that are easily changed out. The purpose of this was that the bulk of the knuckle and the brakes and the rotors and the bearing is never gonna need to come off. But if you ever damaged something or did something, this would bend before this, and you're just gonna simply detach this from the knuckle using these bolts. The nuts that we use are captured inside of the front of the knuckle, so when you zap this out with an impact, this nut actually can't turn within the slot. We have a bump stop on the lead wheel, and we have a bump stop on the trail wheel. So this piece here contacts the arm there. That gives you really strong and a really good stop whenever you're scrubbing in your fronts and understeering. It's basically going to be resting on that point. That's really the only time you're ever going to need a bump stop on a trailing wheel. Otherwise, there isn't a ton of load on the trail wheel, so typically you don't see bump stops on the trailing wheel, but because of the upper control arm getting so close to the tire, we included a trailing wheel bump stop so that the tire can be right next to this arm and it actually won't contact it because of that. Another cool part is the adjustable Ackerman. It is done using shims, bolts that go in the knuckle. Again, you can see the capture nuts and then this bolt on the side, so we're holding it in 2 planes. That is how we adjust Ackerman on this kit. It's very fast, it works really well. Other points that I can make are, we have motion ratio adjustment here, we have sway bar adjustment here, and on the sway bar. Again, this is a high clearance sway bar kit that we sell. Not specifically for the Corvette, but we sell the spline piece and the blades, so you can order those and make your own kit. The upper control arm on my car is not the on-car adjustable version, but we will be having an on-car adjustable version with the production kit. If you buy it, both lowers and uppers will be on-car adjustable. In addition to everything that I just said, we do have increased travel range, and we have great bump steer control, and the camber curve is amazing. And all of those things were perfected within the geometry of this new knuckle. Again, the factory knuckle serves well for beginner, intermediate, or however you would break those tiers down. Let's say grassroots and pro-am. But when you get into the pro level, we are looking at the toe curve, we are looking at the Ackerman curve, we are looking at the control of the wheel at full lock, and the stock rack location, doesn't matter what angle kit you have, was simply in a horrible spot. So put your camera in line with the wheel well like this, and you'll see where the factory rack was. These two pieces right here. So the factory rack used to be here, kind of right above the blade, probably there. So you can really see how much of an angle that tie rod would have had to be on in order to be at the same amount of lock. And then you can see where we located our steering rack. And you can see that the angle is significantly better to maintain very good leverage on the wheel. And I cannot explain enough how drastic this was. Whenever you initiate into a hard corner going fast, and that corner, you need to reduce your speed quite a bit. Like let's say you're going from 75 miles an hour down to 45 miles an hour. You're likely going to scrub that with a foot jab and a lot of angle. And what that does is it loads up the front leading wheel a ton. Like almost all of the weight of the car is going to be on that tire. And what that does is it can bind up the power steering system, especially on like a rear rack car. What I noticed with this car was not even a little bit of resistance during a corner like that. And the control that you have at maximum angle is so linear and is so good on this car that I've never driven anything as good as this yet. It's maybe the best drifting suspension setup that I've ever driven. And I only drove the car twice before winning the full series of the High Roller Gambler and winning that event first place against some very high level drivers. Neo won DMCC and Dirk Stratton, and all those guys are very good. That was a full FTF podium, that was really sick. But let's take a look at this from underneath. I'm gonna get Kyle to cycle the wheel back and forth. So he's just gonna be doing this. We're gonna go under the car, and I'm just gonna start pointing out things that are really cool, like how the rack can be removed quickly, how it can be serviced easily, all of that. Okay guys, so keep in mind the suspension is at full droop. And because we put so much travel range into the suspension, it is got a lot of droop. So our actual ride height is quite a bit higher than this. So let's look at a couple things that we had to do here. So the BMW rack is quite narrow compared to the Corvette. So we had to machine these spacers, which will be included in the kit, and widen the physical ram of the rack to get our bump steer perfect and our tie rod length perfect. You'll see how the bump stops are actually making contact on the control arm there. And then you'll see how the trailing one makes contact here. And you get a really good idea of your tie rod clearance to control arm. This clearance will actually improve as suspension compresses, but at full droop, we have full clearance. Looking at everything, like we can check our brake lines and we can see how everything works. These inline rack adapters are great. These are on BMWs, Corvettes, Supras, 240s, and everything that you can think of that replaces the factory ball joint and gives you a Heim joint, which is significantly stronger, lasts a lot longer. The rack plate itself that holds the BMW rack is simply removed by these 4 M10 bolts. And because of this lip, I know it hangs a little bit lower than the factory stuff, but it kind of acts as a nice skid plate. This is made out of alloy steel. There is absolutely no deflection. It is really strong. And you know, I was gonna design a skid plate that kind of continues from this when we get there, and then I was gonna make like a flat bottom splitter and stuff to fill in this space, but that's all in the future. Essentially, buy an E46 steering rack. The kit will come with the steering shaft adapter, connects the factory steering column to the BMW rack with no other modifications. Just a little piece that we machine here, and everything bolts right up. Any E46 steering rack will bolt to this plate. I know there's different versions, purple, gray, yellow. We're using the gray plate. It's a pretty neutral steering ratio, and you really don't need to go for the M rack that has a different ratio, because in drifting, the kit was designed around having a pretty neutral ratio as far as the steering rack goes. So don't need to go crazy on the racks. We use a Volvo steering pump, which is a electric hydraulic pump, and we keep the pressure line as short as possible. So the pump is here, and then the line, I believe it's 22 inches long, and it goes into the rack there. So the line is about this long. Anyone that's running an electric hydraulic pump and puts it in the trunk, you're losing line pressure. Every foot of line, you're dropping 70 to 100 PSI. In order to make up for that, you would have to go to like a dash 10 or 12, but then the pump won't have enough flow. So you'll likely always have a problem if you have an electric pump in the back. Don't do that. It's not good. That is the Corvette rack relocated kit. One note, very important. The header on the driver's side will not fit with this kit. The steering shaft goes from being super wide and all the headers going on the inside to moving inward and going down to the BMW rack, and then all the headers need to be run on the outside. So the biggest thing about this kit that people are not going to buy it because of is just the fact that the driver's side header will probably need to be custom. Otherwise, everything bolts up really nicely. So if you're fitting this and you don't have an engine in your car, you're gonna be like, this was the easiest thing to install ever, until you go to put headers in. So I told you, no excuses. Other than that, it's the best kit on the market. I'm out. Shop on our website for Black Friday. We're gonna have lots of deals. Everything starts at 10% and it goes up from there. So stay in tune with Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and look at what we're going to be doing, because sales are going to be flying. This is the busiest time of year for us by far. We get things going months ahead of time to make sure that we have enough to ship to you guys. So thank you guys for watching. It's been a crazy year. I know it's not the end of the year, but anyways, I'll see you in the next video. It's probably going to be next week. I'm out. Thanks, Kyle. Are you dead? Can you give us a flex?